Let's open up your book to page 388, lesson 1. So now we're going to start instructing geometry. And the first lesson here, lesson 1, is plane figures, page 388. So let's look at the learning objectives. Plane figures are classified by the properties of their sides and angles. The sum of the interior angles of any four-sided plane figure is 360 degrees. So you need to remember that. By using the properties of any four-sided plane figure and algebraic reasoning, you can find missing angle measures. Let's look at the top of page 388 and let's get started. So the first thing they discuss in your book here is four-sided plane figures. A plane figure is a set of line segments, all lying on a single plane. To prepare for the GED test, learn the properties of each shape. You will need to identify the characteristics of different types of four-sided plane figures and draw conclusions about their angles and sides. Now, one of the notes they make right here in your book is sides with the same markings are equal. And you see that in the illustration that they show here in your book. Next paragraph. You are already familiar with rectangles and squares. A rectangle is a four-sided figure with four right angles. The opposite sides across from one another, are the same length and they are parallel. A square is actually a kind of rectangle. It too has four right angles with parallel opposite sides. However, a square has one additional property. Its four sides are all the same size, the same length. A parallelogram is a four-sided figure whose opposite sides are parallel and the same length. In addition, its opposite angles, the angles diagonally across from each other, are also equal in measure. A special parallelogram called a rhombus has four sides of equal length. Now, they don't show you the rhombus in the book, but here is what the rhombus looks like. And it almost looks like you just have a square, because all four sides are equal, but it sits on its point, right? So this is an example of a rhombus, and yes, as they indicated, all four sides are equal. Okay, so that's a picture of your rhombus. Now, the next paragraph, you have a trapezoid. You need to know what these shapes are because they may come up. So a trapezoid is a four-sided figure with exactly one pair of parallel sides. The definition of a trapezoid does not dictate the measure of the angles or the lengths of the sides. All four-sided plane figures have one important property in common. The sum of the measures of the interior angles is 360 degrees. You can use this fact to find a missing angle measure. So what I just said, that's important. You really need to know that. So the interior angles are what? 360 degrees. And you're going to see how that becomes very important in just a moment, okay? So all four-sided plane figures have that particular property. that the interior angles is 360 degrees. Now, let's look at an example at the bottom of page 388. In figure A, B, C, D, the opposite sides are parallel. What is the measure of angle A? So let's go ahead and get one. I want to illustrate it for you, and then we want to indicate the different measures, just as they have it illustrated in your book. So let's see if we can get an example of this particular shape. Okay, so as you can see on this particular shape, and they tell you right there in your book, this particular shape is a parallelogram, okay? And so we'll try to illustrate exactly what they have there. So they show this angle here is 110 degrees, right? And this is angle B. You have angle D, C, and A. But now notice here you have two lines here, and on the opposite side you have two lines. So that's indicating that those lines opposite each other are the same, all right? They are equal in measure. And here, this side and this side is equal in measure. That's what those lines mean. And they told you that in the beginning. It says, if you look at the top of the book, bold print, sides with the same markings are equal, right? So they want to know, what is the measure of angle A? Okay, so when you're looking at this, remember that, and this is not 1100. This is 110, okay? Make it a little bigger so you can see it is 110. That other circle is the degrees symbol, right? So if angle B is 110, let's write this over here, 110. And that means the opposite angle, angle C, is also what? 110, correct? Okay. So that's 220. Okay, so between the two of these, B and C, we have 220. Okay? And they told you that the interior angles, a four-sided plane, interior angles equals 360. So then what we're going to do is subtract 220 from 360. So go ahead and put it in your calculator. 220 minus the 360 will leave us what? 140, right? So A and D together equals 140. Therefore, angle D must be 70 degrees. And then that tells us that angle A is also 70 degrees. So angle A equals 70 degrees. That's what they want to know. And if you look in your book, it goes over to page 389, and it shows you exactly what we just showed you on the white screen. That 2x plus 110 plus 110 equals 360. So they just did it as an equation, and what they did is they solved for x. So we can do that so you can see it. Let's see if we can get it over here. Let me get a black pen so you can see it. So they solve for x, 2x plus 110. Hopefully we have enough space plus 110. I've already given you the answer, but I want to show you how they solve for x, just in case you're looking at the equation in the book and trying to figure out how did they get to 70. Well, we've done enough of these, right? So that gives us, we can combine the 110, right? So then that gives us over here what? 2x plus 220 on this side of the equation. Equals, and just bring the 360 down. And of course, you know, when we're solving for x, we want to get x off to itself. And in this case, this is an addition. So we want to do the opposite of addition, which is subtract 220 on this side. And when we do that, that cancels out, right? And that leaves 2x on this side. But remember, what we do to one side, we have to do to the opposite. So we did a minus 220 over there. We have to do a minus 220 on this side of the equation. And of course, that leaves us 140. Okay, but keep in mind, we're still trying to do what? Solve for x. So as long as there's something there with x, we have to still work to cancel it, right? So here we see 2x equal 140. So that 2 times x, we have to get rid of the 2. And you have to do the opposite or the inverse, as we know. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide 2 by 2. And it cancels out, right? Leaving x on this side of the equation. And what you do to one side, guess what? We do to the opposite. So we have to divide 2 over here. X equals what? 70. Same answer they have in your book. So angle A is 70 degrees. Okay, so we're going to stop here with this particular lesson. And we'll be moving on. Let's stop here.